Now we are moving to pharmaceutical industry, where we have some unusual characteristics, both in its structure and also in the nature of its business operations. Thank you. I'm going to show you again some numbers that you have already seen before. Looking to the numbers like this, they don't really make sense to see exactly how the industries are moving. Therefore, let us put some ratios in place and see a little bit more where we go as an industry. When comparing industries, it is useful to begin with some top-line figures. And a few things will jump out. Like, for example, the first is the high percentage of revenue that receivables represent for airlines and pharma. It's over double the other two. This tells us that these industries' payment cycles are far different and explain why there is such a huge focus on it. The second one is the revenue per employee and EBITDA per employee. They are far different. Basically, this is the cash generation ability of the business. Pharma has the highest EBITDA per employee, driven by the high amortization expenses. Now, I'm asking myself, how many of these pharmaceuticals and biotech companies do you know? Could you recognize 5 of them? And by the way, Anthony, have I mentioned yours? Allergan? Do you see it on the list? So the slide represents pretty much, and now I'm embarrassed that I don't have yours on, pretty much the pharmaceutical market in Europe. Many of these firms supply over-the-counter medicine. You may recognize them more easily. Others, like my company, Alexion, and Amgen, work on rare diseases and are less known. Often, the pharmaceutical industry, as we probably all know, have a bad publicity. I will show more of this later. I have a question for you. And you may use the iPhone or Samsung. I shouldn't use brands. Or any other device. The question is, what is the largest factor in the cost of a new drug? Is it cost of capital? Is it operational expenses? Manufacturing costs or R&D costs? What do you think? Wow. You're absolutely right. I'm impressed at how many of you put the thumb exactly in the right spot. Actually, it's right. And as you can imagine, the costs for a new drug are all of the above. But the last is generally the largest and most variable cost for the pharma industry. Major companies in this industry can pay 10 to 20 times percent of the revenue for R&D expenses. The top R&D spending companies are usually automotive and pharma companies. Let us talk about the major challenges pharma is facing. When we speak about challenges in the pharma industry, we are distinguishing 5 topics, 5 main points. The first one is the social perception of the industry. In the social perception of the industry, it is tightness to pricing and payment terms, and the industry generates big profits, and drugs are often a notable expense for ill people. The industry has a bad reputation and often does not help itself. For example, Martin Shkreli, from Biotech Turing Pharmaceuticals, bought a company and raised the price 56 times the original price, from 13 to 750 per pill. In the process, he was named the most hated man in the US by the press. And it's truly notorious for raising the price of a potentially life-saving drug by 5,000%. The other example is, it's a second CEO, had a brush, raised the price for a EpiPen, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. This is used when someone has an extreme allergic reaction, by 600%. This and many other examples have left the market and consumers with a certain distrust of the pharma industry. If we look, for example, to the second one, which is a regulatory environment, regulations determine what product will be launched, will reach the market, and eventually the patient. Regulations on how to sell it, market it, how it is priced, to whom to sell it. There is a large governmental component to this industry. The other one is substitutes, generics, and biosimilars. Generics and biosimilars are reducing the value of pharmaceuticals and put pricing under pressure. The patents for a typical drug are only valid for 20 years in the US and 15 years in the EU. And you need to spend thousands of dollars to patent every single component of the newly created drug. The substitutes take away your cash flow stream before you had a chance to recover your R&D costs. Then we go to counterfeiting. What is particular to pharmaceutical counterfeiting? Counterfeiting is a big issue, and not only because it reduces the sales, but also, and that is where we have to keep in mind that medicine counterfeiting is much more of a threat to public health than to company revenues. What is the most counterfeited drug in the world? Exactly. Exactly. If you didn't hear it, Viagra. Up to 45% of the Viagra on the market is counterfeit. Then we come to the last one that you all recognize very well. It's a long and expensive R&D cycles. Long R&D times to launch a product due to regulations and required testing. The product needs to meet the regulatory requirements and help the patient, shown and proven that it helped. And here, I'd like to spend a little bit more time on R&D. Why? This is because we all claim that pharmaceutical products are very expensive. But when you look, for example, to what I'm going to show you now, is showing you the major driver for pricing in the pharma world and why R&D is expensive and time-consuming. This is the R&D process of a typical pharmaceutical drug prior to market launch. Look at the potential costs given the timeline and the number of failures before developing a commercial product. New drugs can easily take 10 to 15 years before they hit the market and generate revenue. And since patents are, as mentioned earlier, good for 15 years in the EU and 20 in the US, you can see that this makes for a short window for high returns. To be repeated for nearly every government, and we speak here about EU, US, Japan, China, UK, some products need a decade or more before they see the market. Pretty impressive when you see that failed R&D efforts or mergers with bad R&D pipelines are a key driver in corporate shake-ups in the pharma industry. And combined with the success rate, this determines the long-term viability of the firm and causes pharma companies to put great pressure on their receivable teams to keep receivables current. For us in the credit profession, every reduction in receivables as a percentage of turnover that we make can directly fund the lifeblood of the business, the R&D pipeline. And this brings us to the core of the business. And I put in here the O2C cycle. And I put it in here this way. I'm showing it how I have visualized it for Alexion. Yours may vary slightly, but in principle, the stages are the same. Maybe with different names maybe from other departments, but it's pretty much the same. From the customer's acceptance and onboarding to its creation in your ERP system, the order entry, you look to the shipping that are sold, that are shipped, invoice creation, collection, cash allocation, to the final stage, which is the monthly report that we hopefully can present and our stakeholders are happy. You will see the O2C cycle split in O2I and I2C. As much attention you spend to these sections, the better they will serve your company to keep an eye on your resources and usually spend time to correct incorrect taken actions. Just a few examples. Coping with incorrect customers' details, incorrect entered in your system, or shipped goods to incorrect hospitals sections, like for example, gynecology instead of oncology, which is easily done when you create a customer. Invoice not released on time due to system errors, so no billing, but you ship the goods. Incorrect stipulated price on invoice, which happens very often. Cash applied to similar named customers, which is also brings us actually to my next point, where I would like to focus a little bit on the I2C, the invoice to cash. Speaking about credit management, as you have seen before, I believe that all sections of the O2C are impacting our performance in credit management. But I want to emphasize the I2C because this is the most influential and relevant in closing your books every month and making sure that the money is collected in your own pocket. I mentioned earlier shipping goods to incorrect hospitals section. And I have to tell you that if you think this is not a big deal, it is. Out of experience, I have to tell you that the most important your medication is, the worse it can impact the perception of your company service level, especially if the patient is desperate to receive it. At Alexion, we are supplying life-altering drugs, which is crucial to our patient. It has to arrive on time. And not only on time, but it has to arrive in the right division of the hospital. And the right physician needs to be there to get it and infuse it. This lack of proper service will not only impact your external perception for your company, but also your internal, your credit team. Because your credit team will need to perform a complete investigation with every individual department within O2C to reconcile the case internally before trying to negotiate a way out with the customer and convince him to settle the invoice. This is a hassle, and I know yesterday in the training with Patrick, we had some words on reconciliations, but if you have to dive in reconciliations, it's a tough business. It's not easy done, and it's very time-consuming. I also mentioned the incorrect applied cash. I say cash applied to similar named customer. Isn't it funny? Can happen, right? Or the customer has been recreated for whatever reason, has been decided we just recreate a customer. So you have the receivables on one end and the cash in on the other. The time spent by your staff to trace the correct customer invoice extends not only to time loss, but frustration and irritation to your external customer and internal customer. And you will not keep your credit team happy, I tell you. I move now to how does credit team bring value? From my experience, a company's IT system, and I know we touched this again, and we had it yesterday with John, has to be priority number one. And why? Because it requires to be fast and reliable. You cannot afford to have to wait 15 seconds to have an action that you, a command actioned. And this is what happens today. 15 seconds is almost nothing, but it matters if you're looking for something and you can't find it. And this is a lack of system that it's not actioning the command that you have given. So one of them is leveraging better IT system to manage automated invoicing. Make sure your system is adapted to bill everything that leaves your company. Have you ever encountered that your system failed to convert shipped goods into an invoice? Have you always billed what you shipped? Automatic dunning system. What about informing your customer portfolio of their open invoices and perhaps past due invoices? An integrated system that does this for you on a monthly or even bi-weekly basis. This is a form of proactive cash collection. Sophisticated order blocking management. Unfortunately, at Alexion, we cannot block orders. Our medications, our drugs are too important, and we have to negotiate a way out without blocking orders. Whatever it is, we cannot block orders. But I have to tell you that avoid sophistication. It's very important that you have a system that can tell you when a customer is not paying you and when you have to take certain measurements to mitigate your risk. The last one is ACH, or better known as automated clearinghouse, or bank-to-bank payment systems. I believe we have seen today quite a lot of improvement ideas. I should not spend a lot of time on this topic. I just only say that if you're not taking advantage of this, you are losing many days of DSO and valuable resources. I could extend this with an example, but I try to keep the deadline. One of the last points that I have here is higher need for local language. It was mentioned before by everyone. The language skill set is very important. I'm also including maybe the empathic use of language. The empathic use of language means that you know the cultural value of language in the country where you're operating. And the final point is knowledgeable of local trade instruments. This is a tricky point because more and more are banking trade documentary becoming indispensable if trading outside our comfort zone or risk appetite. Even within our local environment, within the country we operate, we need to make sure we know the variety of trade instruments that are available to us. As for example, RIBA has been mentioned today, or maybe yesterday. Then we have the VCOM, we have the BOE, SBLC, import factoring. I don't know if they are known, but they're very important that we know of them as in credit management. It doesn't make us legal experts, but at least we have them, we know they are there, and we can negotiate with the customers. The last one is automated reporting systems, which is obviously a good to have. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. I know that questions will come. Okay, thank you.